So welcome to chapters 29 and 30. So we're going to look at what we've read so far. And chapter 29 is actually very interesting. I wish we were discussing this chapter in class because there's so many little paragraphs and sentences we would read to look at what is in here. So I'll just go through it and you can follow, you can get your book. It starts on page 245 in this version. So I don't know what version you're using, but you can march there. The first thing we learn here is that Pip wakes up, he's arrived back home. He wakes up really early in the morning. He's anxious to get to Miss Havisham's. In actual fact, if you go back to chapter 28, he got to the carriage to take him to Miss Havisham's about 30 minutes before the carriage showed up. So he's really excited. So he wakes up real early in the morning to get ready. Well, this scene serves another purpose, to tell us that Pip has enough time to actually go visit Joe and then go wherever he wants to go see Miss Havisham. He wakes up early, but he goes roaming around in the neighborhood. But he doesn't go towards where Joe's house is. He goes towards Miss Havisham's house. Obviously because he wants to avoid going in the direction where he would be seen, and probably Joe get to hear that he was in town. Now, all this, while he's walking in the neighborhood, Pip imagines himself like the knight who is going to eventually come to the castle and marry the bride and save everybody. You know, more or less like in Shrek. You know how that happened. Yeah. I can't think of another movie where that happened. Okay. But anyway, Pip thinks of himself as the knight who is going to save Miss Havisham's failing life by marrying Estella and restoring the whole Saty's house. So he walks up the neighborhood close to Miss Havisham's, and then he finally gets there. And when he gets to the door, he meets Estella at the gate. I'm sorry, not Estella, Orlick. Maybe he was hoping Estella would open the gate or somebody else. It is, of all people, Orlick. He gets in the gate. Orlick tells him he's there basically to defend the establishment, the place. Because Orlick, we are told, is nasty enough. Now, if you read the next two pages, 246 and 247, you'll notice Dickens uses a lot of language that dehumanizes, we had this word in a previous chapter, dehumanizes Orlick. He lives in a little kind of thing that looks like a doghouse with a dormouse. A dormouse is that little door you make for your dog or your cat to get in and out of the house without opening the actual door. And there's a door like that in Tom and Jerry. And Jerry always slides in just at the last and the right minute. So Orlick is dehumanized here, and I won't go into details about that. But Pip is here to meet Estella. That is the important part in this chapter. So, page 248. Pip goes in and he meets Miss Havisham, and he says this. She was in her chair near the old table in the old dress, with her two hands crossed on her stick, her chin resting on them and her eyes on the fire, sitting near her with her white shoe that had never been worn in her hand, and her head bent as she looked at it. I'm sorry, I need to go back. Sitting near her with the white shoe that had never been worn in her hand, and her head bent as she looked at it, was an elegant lady whom I had never seen. Pip runs into this girl he has never seen before. Well, we know where this is going. We've read the chapter. That is the writer telling us how much Estella has changed. And then he says here, after he has walked in, the next page, the lady whom I had never seen before lifted up her eyes and looked archly at me. And then I saw that the eyes were Estella's eyes, but she was so much changed was so much more beautiful, was so much womanly. In all things winning admiration that made such wonderful advance that I seemed to have made none. She was so much changed. Estelle has changed so much that Pip feels like he's back to that old scene in the beginning when they played cards and she made fun of him. And Pip feels like he was a nobody, and she made it very clear he was a nobody. So here, Estella has grown and changed so much. Now, you know how Miss Havisham is. So it says here, I fancied as I looked at her that I slipped hopelessly back into the coarse and common boy again. Oh, the sense of distance and disparity that came upon me, and the inaccessibility that came about her. So Pip feels like Estelle has made a lot of progress. He hasn't. And feels as if they're back to the beginning where he has to work even harder to be a gentleman. That's pretty pathetic, especially if you consider that a few days before, Pip refused to escort Joe because he and Joe could not be seen in the streets together because Joe was such a low life. Pip here sees himself as that low life, which is very, very pathetic. But he says here, when I came in, Miss Havisham, I thought there was nothing of Estella in the face or figure, but now it all settles down so curiously into the old what? Miss Havisham kind of stops him. You're not going to say into the old Estella, Miss Havisham interrupted. She was proud and insulting, and you wanted to go away from her. Don't you remember? Well, I said confusedly that was a long time ago. Pip is being broken down here. It was a long time ago. And then after he says all that, Estella smiled with perfect composure and said she had no doubt of my having been quite right and for having been very disagreeable. Is he changed? Miss Havisham asked her. Very much, said Estella, looking at me. Now that should be a positive note for Pip, that Estella has changed. That should be a positive note that Estella notices Pip has changed. Estella, very much, said Estella, looking at me. Less coarse and common, said Miss Havisham, playing with Estella's hair. Estella laughed and looked at the shoe in her hand, and laughed again and looked at me, and put the shoe down. She treated me as a boy still, but she lured me on. So the dream Pip had of coming and seeing Estella and Estella looking at her and going, oh my goodness, I want that, backfires. Okay. And then what is interesting, if you turn to page 250, they talk a little bit. And what we know, actually, before you go to page 250, on page 249, we sat in the dreamy room among the old strange influences which had so wrought upon me, and I learned that she had but just come home from France, and she was going to London. Now, this is very important. It doesn't always come across that way to students. But you'll have to go back and look at the Victorian period, the 19th century. And France was the center of fashion. So Estella going to France would mean she has come back home, having learned all the French customs of class. All classy people went to France, to the center of art and fashion. They learned French, which means now Estella speaks another language that Pip doesn't speak, which means she'll probably pull it out and use it before he can and when he can't. And she'll look down on him because he's not a gentleman of that standard to go abroad and learn another language. It also means Estella has come back with a lot of new clothes that absolutely are different, made by the French, who are the fashion gurus of the time. Pip doesn't have a single suit made in France. His are made by somebody close to Bernard's Inn. So they're probably not good enough. And that is the point here. Now, there's a very interesting thing in this chapter, and it is amazing. After they talked for a while, it was settled that I should stay there all the rest of the day and return to the hotel at night and to London tomorrow. When we had conversed for a while, Miss Havisham sent us out to walk in the neglected garden. On our coming in by and by, she said, I should wheel her about a little as in times of yore. Hold on. Pip and Estelle are about to go walk in the garden. Think about the little walks that have happened in this book. There was a little walk in chapter 17 by Billy and Pip out in the marshes. Do you remember how that went? There's another walk between Joe and Pip in the marshes. Do you remember how that went? Do you remember there was another walk with Pip and Billy after Pip and Joe came from the marshes? How did that go? Do you remember Pip walked alone from home? Why? So a walk in this book is interesting, and this walk is interesting for several reasons. They walk into the garden. Now, I want you to think of this as a foil, this scene, this event, as a foil of the walk in chapter 17. Pip was very proud when he walked with Billy back then. So here he goes. So Estelle and I went out in the garden by the gate through which I had strayed to my encounter with the pale young gentleman, now Herbert. I, Pip, trembling in spirit and worshipping the very hem of her dress. She, quite composed and most decidedly not worshipping the hem of mine. As we drew near to the place of encounter, she stopped and said, first of all, Pip becomes Billy, Estelle becomes Pip. So Pip is worshipping Estelle, and Estelle is paying no attention. She's not interested in him at all. I love this. Sorry to say. I must have been a singular little creature to hide and see that fight that day, she said. But I did, and I enjoyed it very much. You rewarded me very much. This is Pip. Remember the kiss? Yeah. Did I? She replied in an incidental and forgetful way. I remember I entertained a great objection to your adversary, but I took it ill that he should be brought here to pester me with his company. So Estella made Pip, this is an admission, she admits to Pip that she hated to have Herbert there. Well, he and I are great friends now. Are you? I think I recollect though, that you read with his father, yes? So Estella knows Pip and Matthew Pocket have been teacher and student. Now notice another development here in this walk. Remember, Pip didn't go to see Joe, didn't wait for Joe, didn't escort Joe. And he came yesterday and he avoided Joe. He woke up this morning, he avoided Joe. Estella is about to put her foot in this. I made the admission with reluctance, for it seemed to have a boyish look, and she already treated me more than enough like a boy. Since your change of fortune and prospect, you have changed your companions, said Estella. Oh, naturally, said I. Unnecessarily, she added, in a haughty or prideful kind of way. What was fit company for you once, this means Joe, by the way, would be quite unfit company for you now. In my conscience, I doubt very much whether I had any lingering intention left of going to see Joe, but if I had any, this observation put it to flight. So if Pip had about 5 cents worth of wanting to go see Joe, Estella just killed it by telling him, you don't need that low-class, low-life company. And Pip goes, I agree. And so we assume from now on he'll cut Joe off. Really. And then it says this. The air of completeness and superiority with which she walked at my side, and the air of youthfulness and submission with which I walked at hers, made a contrast that I strongly felt. So Estelle walks by Pip, she acting like the god from France, and Pip acting like a worshipper who has been rejected by his own god. Very miserable he is. And for some reason, I don't feel very sorry for him. Now, notice this. He tells us here, he starts to remember things of his past. This is very important, page 251. The garden was too overgrown and rank for walking in with ease, and after we had made the round of it twice or thrice, we came out again into the brewery yard. I showed her to a nicety where I had seen her walking on the casks that first old day, and she said with a cold and careless look in that direction, "Did I?" I reminded her where she had come out of the house and given me my meat and drink, and she said, "I don't remember." "Not remember that you made me cry?" said I. "No," she said, and shook her head and looked about her. I verily believe that her not remembering and not minding in the least made me cry again inwardly, and that is the sharpest crying of all. Pip remembers all these things Estella did to him when they were children, the first time he was here. And Estella goes, "Did I? I don't remember. That happened? Okay. Interesting." She's not sorry about it at all. And Pip realizes he's devastated by this. Now, then Estella says this, page 251 at the bottom. "You must know," said Estella, condescending, we talked about this word before, "to me as a brilliant and beautiful woman might, that I have no heart, if that has anything to do with my memory." What does that mean? Do you remember Pip telling Billy, "I have a heart, but Estella is all there is in it. There's no room for Billy or anybody else." He told Billy, "If I could love you," which is really hard to do. And by the way, if you are a more beautiful girl, which would make it easier, and if you had more money, which would make it easier. He didn't say exactly those words, but he implied those words. "We would have been married. If I had lowered my standard to you, we would probably have been together. But you, Billy, you're just a common girl from the village, and I'm Pip, and I want to be a gentleman for Estella." And now that Estella occupies most of his heart, she tells him, "By the way, I want you to know, I don't have a heart." What would you do if somebody you adored said this? Well, Pip says this. I got through some jargon to the effect that I took the liberty of doubting that I knew better, that there could be no such beauty without it. "Oh, I have a heart to be stabbed or shot in. I have no doubt," said Estella. "And of course, if it ceased to be, I would cease to be. But you know what I mean. I have no softness there, no sympathy, no sentiment, or rather, no feeling. That nonsense." Straight out of the book. So she's telling Pip, "Look, all that love stuff, I don't feel it. I do have a heart, but it's basically just like a pump, it's like a well. It's a well pump. It just pumps liquid, and if it stops, I'll stop living. But there's nobody in there. There are no feelings for anybody in there. It's just kind of there. In short, Pip, you are not in it. There's no Pip in there or room for him." It would be nice if Billy would hear this conversation. "Oh, I have a heart to be stabbed, but there's nothing there." Now, something significant happens at this time. Estella is gesturing with her hands. And if you have your book out, I want you to notice on page 252, and this is very important because it's a big, significant point in the plot, but it's only carried by a 3-letter word. So if you have not got your book, look in your book on page 252, this version. The paragraph that starts with "What was it?" You notice at the end of that paragraph, there's a break and it goes, what was it? And then there's another paragraph at the bottom and it goes, what was it? What was it? 3 times. The word was italicized. In Dickens' writing, italicized words usually carry more meaning than they appear to carry. Remember that statement, and you are late from earlier? Yeah. I asked you that question. Why is that italicized? There's a reason. Now, what was it? Now, I want you to look at page 252. What was it that was borne in upon my mind when she stood still and looked attentively at me? So she stops and looks at Pip. And Pip goes, wait a minute. I just saw something. And he doesn't know what it is. That something is what we are looking for. Anything that I had seen in Miss Havisham? No. Did I see something in her that reminded me of Miss Havisham? No. In some of her looks and gestures, there was that tinge of resemblance to Miss Havisham, which may often be noticed to have been acquired by children from grown-up persons with whom they are associated or secluded by or seduced by. Okay, so basically seduced in the sense that if you live with your parent has all these gestures and you're naturally kind of forced or encouraged or unconsciously become a use of them. Or if you're isolated with somebody, you copy their behaviors. Pip is saying there's something about Estella and I can't exactly tell what it is and where I saw it, but there's something. What was it? What was it? There's something about Estella that reminds me of something. And then he says, and yet I could not trace this to Miss Havisham. I looked again and thought, and though she was still looking at me, the suggestion was gone. So suddenly, in a snap, that resemblance is gone. And Pip is left wondering, what was it? Who was it? Okay. The next paragraph. Remember, Estella is not in this. This is Pip thinking on his side, on his own, on a side. But then it continues. I'm serious, said Estella. She's back to saying I don't have a heart. Not so much with a frown, for her brow was smooth, as with a darkening of her face. If we are to be thrown much together, you had better believe it at once. That is, if you and I are going to be together, you just need to know this right off the bat. No, imperiously stopping me as I opened my lips. So Pip tried to answer and she goes, hold on. I have not bestowed my tenderness, this is Estelle, anywhere. That is, I've never been nice to anybody, anywhere. I have never had any such thing. Which means I'm not about to start. So Estelle will have a problem probably in the future with her personality, but Pip is in trouble. This is the girl he's been dreaming about. And she's saying, like Rosaline in another book, I'm not interested. I really don't care. I don't have any feelings, at least not for you. Okay. In another moment, we were in the brewery so long disused that she pointed to the gallery. Notice here she's pointing. She moves her hand, and this is what's important. As my eyes followed her white hand, again, the same dim suggestion that I could not possibly grasp crossed me. My involuntary start occasioned her to lay her hand upon my arm. Instantly, the ghost passed once more, and was gone. What was it? So she stretches out her hand, and she kind of puts her hand on him, and he feels like, even in that gesture, the way she just moved her hand, that reminds me of something or someone. What was it? Unfortunately, we are not told that in this chapter, so we'll have to wait. Okay. Estella is still saying, I don't have feelings. That's the topic. What is the matter? Asked Estella. Are you scared again? I should be if I believed what you just said now, I replied to turn it off. Notice Pip is trying to forget what he was thinking about Estella looking like she looks familiar or related to somebody he knows, and he can't figure out who. And he just goes back to the conversation. I'm just terrified you said you don't love anybody. Because I would like to be in there in your heart somewhere. He doesn't say those are my words. Then you don't? You don't believe me? Very well, it is said at any rate. Miss Havisham will soon be expecting you at your old post, though I think that might be laid aside now with other old belongings. Let us make one more round of the garden and then go in. Do you remember Estelle asking Pip, should we walk on or go home? And Pip the idiot said, let's walk some more so I can hurt your feelings more. Estelle has just told Pip, I don't love anybody, I don't feel anything. And she goes, well, let's walk some more. Let's walk some more. And then she says this, come, you shall not shed tears for my cruelty today. You're not going to cry today for my cruelty. She's already been mean enough, and she's telling him, don't worry. He's crying on the inside. You shall be my page and give me your shoulder. The word page basically means a servant, an assistant, a messenger. Is that the position Pip wants to play in Estella's life? Do you remember Pip had the Avenger, the boy he hired? Estella is calling him that kind of boy. So they walk. Her handsome dress had trailed upon the ground. She held it in one hand now, and with the other lightly touched my shoulder as we walked. We walked around the ruined garden twice or thrice more, so they walked for a long time. And that means that she hurts him a lot. Okay, she just grinds it down that she doesn't love anybody. And then they go back in the house. At the end of page 253, it says, Estella looked more bright and beautiful than before, and I was under strong enchantment. So he's saying, she looks very beautiful at dinner time, and he is just all over her, although she has no heart. And then Miss Havisham says, love her, love her, love her. And then followed by the sentence, how does she use you? Is that what you love about people, for them to use you? Of course not. And then Miss Havisham says, hear me, Pip. I adopted her to be loved. I bred her and educated her to be loved. I developed her into what she is, that she might be loved. Love her. Pip takes this as a rule. But then Miss Havisham says what true love is, according to Miss Havisham. You can see why the guy bolted before the wedding. I'll tell you, said she, in the same hurried, passionate whisper, what real love is. It is blind devotion and questioning self-humiliation, utter submission, trust and belief against yourself and against the whole world, giving up your whole heart and soul to the smear as I did. So she's asking Pip to do that, but Estella is not required to do that. And so that walk is very significant. It's a foil setting of another setting. It will be interesting to see if there will be other walks in this book and what they look like. Okay. Jairus comes to dinner, and this is important. We notice that we are told on page 255 that Miss Havisham was scared of Jairus. So you have to wonder why. Okay. She made a strong attempt to compose herself and stammered that he was as punctual as ever. She looked scared of Jairus. You wonder why. You wonder why. We don't know. We are not told here. We notice on page 257, when they're having dinner, Jairus avoids looking at Estella. You wonder why. Why would he do that? So we don't know. We have to look at that later. And the rest of this chapter really is that. And then it ends up with this. Miss Havisham again repeating, love her, love her, love her. And then at the last paragraph, me, I thought those were high and great emotions, but I never thought there was anything low and small in my keeping away from Jo, because I knew she would be contemptuous of him. It was but a day gone, and Jo had brought the tears into my eyes. They had soon dried, God forgive me, soon dried. And Pip says he loved Jo once, but once was not now, and he isn't going to be interested in Jo again. In chapter 30, which you read along this chapter, Pip, this is a very straightforward chapter. Pip tells Jarlath, he thinks he's going to tell Jarlath it's not a good idea for Orlick to be working there. We wonder how Orlick got here. We wonder why he is here. He told us because he can hit somebody just as hard as they can hit. And Pip decides to avoid Jo the next morning. And then we are told, instead of going to Jo's house, he sends Jo a gift. Now, what he gives him is really useless stuff. A barrel of oysters. How long can you keep oysters in a humid community when there's nothing going on? There's no refrigeration. There's no way to store those things. So it is a waste. When Pip gets back home in chapter 30, he tells Hubert how things transpired. And Hubert tells him, just forget the girl. And Pip is too stupid to do that. We know that. But then we also learn that Hubert has a girlfriend, Clara. And Hubert can't get married because he doesn't have any money. So there's a lot of Dickens autobiographical information in this book. Remember, Dickens had a girlfriend or obsessed with a girl, and he couldn't marry her because her parents didn't want him to marry her because he didn't have enough money. So that sounds very, very familiar. But Hubert does advise Pip to forget Estella. And we learn also here that Hubert himself is engaged and he needs money. But unfortunately, Pip is not sympathetic enough to maybe offer to pay for the wedding, although he has a lot of money, or even help Clara, that's the girl's name, whose father is sick. You notice here we have another character, Clara, who is taking care of her father who is a drunk. So this is another occurring